So today we're going to talk about how to avoid Pokemon Scalpers in 2022? Question mark? Have I got my point across yet? Alright, let's talk about it. But first, let's roll that intro. Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, friends, we talk about how to avoid Pokemon TCG Scalpers, and today's video is based off of this Screen Rant article from the Game Features section that was shockingly published on April 25th of this year, 2022, so not that long ago. The concept of Pokemon TCG Scalpers still exists enough for certain writers to feel the need to write about it. So in today's video, I wanted to take a look at that particular article. Even though I think the scalper issue has been widely resolved, I do think there's still some interesting insight that we can obtain from talking through today's article, and so that's why I chose to do a video on it. As always, the link to this article will be down below. Definitely go to check out the source of this article, screenrant.com. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and you think I deserve it, definitely feel free to leave a like on the video. It's the best way to help push this video out to other people so that they can continue to learn and enjoy the Pokemon TCG as well. And hey, if you really think I deserved it and you really want to support the channel, you can also become a subscriber to the Analytic Gengar by clicking that big old subscribe button down below. But with all that said, friends, let's jump right on into today's article. So, with the Pokemon TCG's explosion in value in 2022, collectors have struggled to purchase Pokemon cards, but here are some of the ways to avoid TCG scalpers. Now, I think before we even get started, I should probably go through a very elementary summary of what's gone on in the past 2 years. If you're just watching this video after returning to the Pokemon TCG for anything greater than a 2-year hiatus, welcome. I'm sorry you landed on this channel first. Just kidding. But seriously, one of the things that has gone on in the hobby over the past few years, particularly since the COVID-19 health pandemic, is a lot of people have taken to Pokemon cards in order to make a quick buck. Effectively, with all of the pandemic-related shutdowns, it impacted the ability for the card manufacturers to print the Pokemon cards that were in very high demand. And as a result, people who were quick enough to pick this stuff up inevitably ended up scalping the prices of these particular trading cards. So what they would do is buy the cards quicker than anyone else could, and then sell them back for a profit, given that demand was high enough that justified, increased prices. Now, the great scalping of 2020, as I've chosen to calling it, has widely and by far ended, and I think that's one of the things I needed to say at the beginning of this video. So I find it interesting that this article was published when it was, and when I saw it come across one of my Google searches, I was actually astounded that people were still writing about this. But then I realized something that maybe isn't as obvious if you're just thinking about this too quickly, and that is that for a lot of people who might be new to the trading card hobbies or might be jumping in for the first time, because we do know sometimes that happens, there is a likelihood that you don't know any of the stuff that's been going on recently. And so I figured that that was one of the reasons that this article was published, and one of the reasons I think it's still worth making a video every once in a while and reminding folks of, hey, there are still scalpers out there. They're not as successful as they used to be, and a quick Google search will probably get you a better price by at least 25% from what a scalper is selling something for. However, all that said, it is important to make sure that that opinion and that statement of fact is vocalized repeatedly. So something to keep in mind. Now, with this article in particular, it's left many fans wondering how they can get their hands on Pokemon cards without having to buy from resellers. And that's a, that's a very good point. There are your standard stores, things like Target, GameStop, eBay, PokemonCenter.com, assuming you can log into it. But by and far, there are tons of folks either on Facebook Marketplace, on Wish, on a bunch of other places that are effectively still trying to push the price of Pokemon cards up, even though the supply, which, was a major part of why scalpers were able to succeed back in the day, are now sort of, kind of flatlining, because many of their profits are now single-handedly just not able to sustain themselves anymore. And so for the most part, they have moved on to different things or back to more traditional areas that are more highly scalped, such as sneakers and GPUs. So this particular article goes on to, mention like, hey, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, right? So you've got Logan Paul scooping up the Illustrator promo for 5.2. You've got skyrocketing prices on many modern cards, meaning scalpers want to grab this TCG stuff in order to get in on the profits being made by Nintendo Collectibles. And so, yeah, that's really kind of where this article lands. They do kind of, read across some of the many famous stories of the COVID-19 pandemic era. So things like Pokemon cards being temporarily stopped from selling at certain stores like Target, or things like, the McDonald's foolishness that went on when they launched a 25th anniversary promotion set, and TCG fans being disgusted by reports of scalpers buying hundreds of the Happy Meals just so they could resell the promotional Pokemon cards for exorbitant prices on eBay. And this did in fact happen, right? So people were just buying the Happy Meals purely with the intention of tossing the food and then getting their hands on the cards. And so that was another drama that we ended up living through. And all in the course of 2 short years. Now, while for decades the Pokemon TCG has been able to buy cards without problems, the massive influx of scalpers left many out in the cold. I think that's an important thing to note. Once people realized that it was even slightly profitable, many more scalpers were willing to invest the time and energy into Pokemon cards. I think that's one of the biggest things to note about scalpers, is that they operate on a very simple business model. They do volume and they do profit. So as long as something can be sold for significant enough a profit that you can net things like eBay fees, shipping, PayPal fees, they're fine and squared away. Bear in mind, they're not scammers, right? So they're not necessarily always looking to scam someone out of, a genuine fraud or a genuine type of crime type of situation, right? So when you see a scalper selling something, they may not necessarily be trying to trick you or take your money, although they might quite literally be trying to trick you into paying a higher price and taking all of your money or more of your money than MSRP should you have been able to buy this on a store shelf. And so that's one of the things to bear in mind, is that scalpers are usually just motivated by profit. Scammers are where you usually end up with things like fraud or bait and switch type of schemes where, they'll do more to get you to give them money and then never send you any product. There is a difference. I do like to make a very clear distinction between that difference, because it's unfair to say that every scalper is a scammer and every scammer is a scalper, because, they are kind of concentric circles that exist in their own separate realms. There is often a lot of overlap, so I'm certainly not saying that, they're two exclusive categories all to their own, but I do think that scalpers behave in a very particular way, and it's very important to realize that they behave the way they do, right? A scammer could straight up lie to you and tell you, hey, I have cards. It doesn't matter, how big or how small. And they don't care, right? Their motivation is complete fraud, or the fraudulent, quote unquote sale of Pokemon cards. For a scalper, their major concern is if they're gonna, be in the red or in the green after netting out their eBay fees, their PayPal fees, and the shipping that they have to pay in order to get the cards to you. So just bear that in mind, because that distinction helps you realize when scalper activity is going to go up or down versus when scammer activity is going to go up and down. Now, with all that said, another important thing to note is that, as you can see on screen, one of the things you can do in order to really beat out the scalpers is to wait for Pokemon card restocks. So this is probably one of the most common sense approaches to things, but I do want to point out for that the better part of 2020 and even 2021, this was not a viable way of obtaining Pokemon cards for the average collector. The genuine truth of the matter is that since COVID-19 really impacted the ability to produce Pokemon cards, and there was an artificially high amount of demand, given that there were scalpers as well as many collectors who wanted a hobby again, one of the major issues that we saw is that restocks simply were not coming. And if you need any evidence of this, look no further than a set like Champion's Path, which came out in the fall-ish of 2020 and genuinely never got the reprint that it needed. So there were tons of products printed, but I feel Pokemon was burning on every cylinder in order to get some product out there. And genuinely speaking, it didn't see the print run that an equivalent set like Shining Fates a little bit later on did. Bear in mind, Shining Fates has had multiple restocks now, but that's exactly the gimmick, is that if you were a big Champions Path fan, you were waiting a minute for restocks. And that meant oftentimes scalpers were able to get your money. Nowadays, and I do want to make the distinction, nowadays most sets are being revisited, they are being reprinted. We've seen everything from Vivid Voltage and Darkness Ablaze to Shining Fates, and it wouldn't surprise me if at some point we see a distributor also confirm Champion's Path being up on the table. Wouldn't also surprise me if maybe we see some Celebrations product tossed out here and there. You know, who's to say, right? So I think those are some of the things that are important to bear in mind, is that nowadays we are seeing tons of restock, tons of cards coming in, and so that means that nowadays, even though in the past you may not have been able to, you need to get over that, because for the most part cards are being printed and restocked at a very reasonable rate, and that means that for the most part, even if you completely saw the opposite in the past, it is now safe to go out there expecting to get some cards on store shelves every single week, because things are, for the most part, back to normal and resuming at perhaps even an accelerated rate, meaning they're going to be printing a lot more cards because they know business is up and going, especially because even after the pandemic, there was a residual increase in the amount of genuine fans in this hobby, and so they're just increasing printing to meet the increased demand. The next thing that ended up coming out of this article is join Pokemon TCG fan groups. Now, I personally think this is one of the most effective things that you can do. Fan groups can be found all across Facebook and Reddit and a bunch of other social media apps. And there are even some Twitter accounts that tweet out when stuff goes back in stock. Now, again, many of these quote-unquote in-stock alerts were very much driven off of and inspired by the pandemic, because the idea was that some people were able and in a position to help others out by giving them restock updates as soon as possible. And that is incredibly valuable, because scalpers would use the same type of technology in order to find out when stuff was in stock and then go buy all of it before anybody else even knew about it. So many of these in-stock alerts, whether they came from Facebook or a Twitter bot or whatever have you, were primarily to help level the playing field. So a scalper couldn't leisurely go in there and buy all the stock out of a given store. Instead, everyone else had the same alert and was able to get on their phone, get on their computer, and go buy the stuff that they wanted. Nowadays, again, scalper demand has really drastically reduced, and that's because the product is everywhere. Because the marketplace is more or less basically flooded with product, it makes for a great scenario where, you know, there's always going to be a cheaper market option. And so even the most in-demand sets like Brilliant Stars will often see sales or flash sales or competitive pricing for some of the product, which is pretty cool. So I definitely recommend Facebook, Reddit. There's tons of great ones. I have even considered doing one for the channel, so definitely let me know if that is something that you are interested in. I will definitely start either posting on the community tab, posting on Twitter, whatever have you, as much as I can. But I'm also happy to recommend a few should anyone want to hit me up via email or Instagram or what have you, and I can definitely let you know some of the ones that I personally am in and that I use as well. Now, the other thing that is really cool about these groups is that you do have the ability to really meet some cool people. So bear in mind, this, trading card game is a hobby you can enjoy by yourself or with others. And so, things like trading, things like feedback, all are incorporated into some of the larger Facebook groups out there and some of the larger Reddit groups out there. What that effectively means is that not only is it a great way to get connected with people, it's a great way to get TCG product, it's a great way to get into some of the other aspects of the TCG, it's a great way to facilitate trading, and for the most part, there are a lot of community guidelines and rules that really do make it a safe place to really kind of enjoy the hobby with like-minded people, which is pretty cool. Finally but not least, on this article, we have the "Do not purchase Pokemon cards from unofficial retailer" statement. Now, here's where I am not the biggest fan of the way they worded this. And hear me out as to what I mean. When you say unofficial retailer, technically that includes folks like myself, that includes someone like PokeRev, that includes someone like any literal person on TCG Player. You get the idea. So there are a lot of people who are kind of covered by this blanket statement, at least the way that I read it. As a result, it obviously limits the amount of transactioning that you can do because you're technically limited to GameStop and Target and Amazon and some of the more shopped, stores, whether they be in person or online. As a result, you oftentimes miss out on supporting a local game store or a smaller business, oftentimes with better pricing. So ironically enough, I don't necessarily think you have to purchase from only official retailers. I think what you do need to be good at, though, is identifying scalpers and then making sure that you are either always paying with something like PayPal or a credit card. The reason I say that is because PayPal has their buyer protection. If your cards don't show up or are not in the authentic condition they were previously sold to you under, guess what? You get your money back. Same thing with a credit card. You can always start up a dispute and call it a day. If, however, you meet Young Metro 69 in a dark alleyway in the dankest part of New York City and he wants only cash, there is a good chance you may lose a kidney, and there is a probably better chance that you're going to get ripped off. So that's what I mean to say when I say, those are the unofficial retailers you should actually probably skip. Don't buy from them. However, most TCG stores that have, an official website or are a reputable seller here in the community via, their reputation, their Instagram page, feedback from other people, they're more than fine to buy from. And more importantly, they can get you some pretty good deals by, buy or secure stuff for you in bulk or, anything of that sort that you might be interested in. Let's say you're very interested in a particular set or you're very interested in a particular deal of some sort. So that is one thing that I do think, this article gets wrong. Ultimately, it's not worth purchasing products online from unofficial retailers. Not only are they often overpriced, but can't be guaranteed a fair shot at scoring a rare collectible inside the pack they bought. I think that's kind of unfair to say, especially when many of the TCG players are not necessarily official retailers, right? So many of these TCG stores, TCG player accounts, many of these YouTubers and other people, they're not necessarily official brick and mortar retailers either, right? And I don't know if the phrasing of that is incorrect, but I certainly think you can expand your selection of stores to at least the ones that we know to be legit and the ones that are very, big in the community. And then I think from there, you just kind of step aside and, definitely, again, avoid this guy in this alleyway. Probably not going to end well for you. And finally but not least, that's the end of the article. Yeah, so, if nothing else, the article does note that the scalping problem has united the Pokemon TCG community in a way not seen since its launch in the 90s. I do agree, a lot of people have taken a lot of steps to be really cool, really kind of share their knowledge of scalping and how to not get scalped with the overall community, and I think that's been very powerful. It's obviously been a great way to help unite the community and also a great way to help get cards in people's hands. As I previously stated, this is not really much of a problem anymore. For the most part, you can really go on any website, any major retailer, any TCG account and find most modern product. Probably the hardest thing you're going to find right now, or not find right now, is going to be Evolving Skies. And honestly, even the Pokemon TCG community has acknowledged widely that it is kind of scarce right now. But even then, you'll see the Pokemon Center pop up with loose blisters every once in a while. And so even that, I have a feeling, will get its print run expanded in a future month or so. so I can't necessarily say when, but for the most part, most Pokemon product is in abundant stock. Obviously, there are some main takeaways that you can take from this video, and they'd serve you good if you were a experienced buyer and seller, if you were a novice in the space, or you were something in between. So, with all that said, friends, let me know your thoughts down below. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, definitely feel free to leave a like on the video. And hey, if you're not already, feel free to subscribe in order to join the Gengar Gang. Let me know your thoughts about what you think about scalpers and if any of these tips are actually useful. And other than that, thanks again for checking out another video. I hope you guys are doing well, and we will talk soon. Peace!